everyone. I'm Kate with the Creative Coast, and we're kicking off this week's Lunchtime Topic. Today is Wednesday, December 2nd. I can't believe we're already into the holiday season, but I wish 2020 would get here sooner, please. So today we're excited because we have Shannon Lowery, who is the Content and Social Media Manager for Visit Savannah, where she manages both leisure and non-leisure social media efforts. A little bit about Visit Savannah, the largest business unit of the Savannah Area Chamber of Commerce. It is the official destination marketing organization for the greater Savannah area. They work closely with, Visit Savannah works closely with the Chamber member businesses to ensure the continued growth and success of our economy. Shannon also assists with editorial content for visitsavannah.com and spearheads the emerging and innovative creative campaign strategies. I think you had a recent Halloween video series that you guys put out on social that I loved. That was great, Down in the Tunnels. So if you don't follow Visit Savannah on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Insta, go do that. Most recently, Shannon appears as the talent in the Hunter series and hosts Visit Savannah's new podcast, Savannah, Georgia, Anything But Ordinary. So go check that out as well too. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon.
Thanks, Kate. All right, everyone, I'm going to get my screen set up before I start talking to you because multitasking is hard. All right, let's see here. All right. There we go. Okay. All right. Thanks, Kate. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be here to talk to all of you. We're going to be hitting some really great topics, especially in the world of social media and digital marketing today. I can't wait to cover all of those with you. As Kate mentioned, I am the Content and Social Media Manager here at Visit Savannah. I've been here for about 3.5 years. And I will talk more about myself in a minute, but we just want to remind you that if you have questions, you can drop them in the chat box, or at the end, hopefully we'll have time for a Q&A. If for any reason any of that doesn't happen or you think of things later, you can always send me an email at slowery@visitsavannah.com or find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to find me because we've been sharing everything on the creative post pages and everything. So find me on there, ask me questions. I'm happy to provide my slide deck or anything like that. So that's all available to you whenever we're done. Let's go ahead and get started here. So before we get into the content, we're talking today about humanizing the brand. So how can we do that without me humanizing myself to you? I don't want to just be a talking head. So to give you a little bit of background about me, I moved to Savannah from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I have a degree in dance, actually. I performed at the Savannah Ballet Theater for 5 seasons as a semi-professional ballet dancer. And that was really great, but it was really hard. And I retired about a year ago, and I continued to do some productions with Savannah Theater, which I still hope to be a cast member for in the near future when COVID calms down a little bit. And another hobby that I have that's kind of unique is I play Gaelic football with the Savannah GAA, it's the Savannah Gaelic Athletic Association. We actually just had our first match a couple weeks ago, and I broke my nose and got 7 stitches. So if you can see this nice little bad boy right here, that's a new addition to my face, but it's okay. It's not too bad. So that's a little bit about me. As I mentioned, I've been at Visit Savannah for 3.5 years. I started actually at the front desk, and then I moved into the social media coordinator position. And then I was promoted to social and content manager earlier this year in early 2020, and I've really enjoyed doing that in a bit more of a management role and really diving deeper with our content team and the stuff we're producing. So speaking of content, I already told you a little bit about what I do, but to be more in depth, anything that comes on Visit Savannah social media or even the other brands of the Savannah Chamber, which includes Savannah Meetings and Conventions, the Savannah Sports Council, and the Savannah Chamber socials, I generally touch it in one way or another, whether that's editing copy that someone else has created, whether that's distribution, whether that's community management, whether it's idea creation, kind of on the very front end of content creation. I'm involved kind of in the process from beginning to end in one way or another, depending on the project, depending on the day, and depending on the channel. So each day is a little bit different for me, but I spend a lot of time scheduling content and responding to questions and trying to think of new ways to say things about photos about Savannah on Instagram and coming up with caption ideas and things like that. I work very closely with our friend Tyler Edick. Shout out to Tyler for suggesting me to be a presenter here. We together work a lot on different videos for Visit Savannah, as well as our podcast, Savannah, Georgia, Anything But Ordinary, which is our new really big project that we've taken over in the last year. So that's really exciting. And that's just a little bit of what I do on a day-to-day basis. So on today's agenda, we're going to be talking about compelling content. Obviously, we need to kind of dive deeper into what compelling content is. What does that mean? How is compelling content different from just content? We'll answer those questions. We're also going to talk about humanizing your brand voice. We'll look at just the general idea of humanizing your brand and what that means, and then specifically how you can do that using your voice and what exactly your voice is. We would do that. We will look at all of those strategies using examples from Visit Savannah's social media. And then, as I mentioned at the end, hopefully we'll have time for a Q&A. If for some reason that doesn't happen or you think of things later, again, find me on LinkedIn. You can shoot me a message there or shoot me an email at slowery@visitsavannah.com. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So as I mentioned, what is the difference between compelling content and regular content? We used to always hear this buzzword, content, content, content. But now it's really shifted to be compelling content. So, and I have my notes, so if you hear my papers, I'm just trying to stay on track. We used to always use the phrase, I know here at Visit Savannah, we'd use the phrase content is king. And that's been our big buzzword for the last maybe 5 years or so. Obviously in the mid 2010 decades, 2015, everybody needed to be producing content. If you weren't producing content, you probably have started doing content in the last 5 years, whether that means getting on social media, whether that means adding editorial pieces to your website. There's a lot of different ways that content can be created and can be distributed, but I'm sure that your brand started doing it in one way or the other within the last 5 years. So because you and a million other brands have started creating content, there's now this inundation of content. So compelling content is the good content that cuts through the noise of all the other content. And it's really important to have that because people are consuming content at unfathomable rates. They can't even remember the things that they've seen on a day-to-day basis on Instagram. I'm sure if you think back to scrolling through your Facebook last night before you went to bed, or, you know, looking at things this morning, you know, having a cup of coffee, you probably can't remember a large portion of the things you actually looked at. But the things you do remember are the compelling content pieces. And we as brands want to be those compelling content pieces. So in a world where we used to say content is king, this is a reference to The Crown. I hope I have other fans of The Crown out there. Content is now Prince Philip. Compelling content is the queen, okay? So if you haven't seen The Crown, watch it, and that hopefully will make sense. So what exactly is compelling content? And a lot of this might sound repetitive, but we really want to make sure we're being really clear. Compelling content is unique. It stands out. It cuts through the noise. As I mentioned, there's a million pieces of content on the internet, from pictures of dogs to memes that your grandma shares to recipes. There's all kinds of stuff. Compelling content is the stuff that's scroll stopping. It may have, and it could be scroll stopping in a multitude of ways. It could be kind of shocking. It could make you feel a certain way. You might see someone you recognize or a celebrity that you admire. It can be scroll stopping in a lot of different ways, but it is certainly scroll stopping. And it's also influential. Compelling content is influential in two different ways. It influences our consumers, which is the big thing that relates back to our key performance indicators, our KPIs. They are the ones that are buying our products, that are following our brands on social media, that are booking your rooms, they're coming to your restaurant, things like that. So compelling content influences your consumer to make those decisions. But in the second phase of influence, compelling content affects your competitors. We all want to be leaders in our industry. We all want to be, the top dog. We want to be the brand that other brands look up to and aspire to be. Compelling content really sets you apart from your competitors and makes your competitors analyze what they're doing to keep up with you. Think about your favorite ads and think about why you like them. they're compelling. What makes them compelling? Let's talk about that. So there are 4 pillars that we're going to talk about today to compelling content. The first one is awareness, and awareness really focuses on educating your audience. It provides information, it provides value. It can raise brand awareness, it can raise product awareness. Think of it like a movie trailer. It may not be quite as far down the funnel as far as purchasing behaviors of your audience, but it definitely puts the bug in their brain, kind of. Busy audiences really appreciate the awareness pillar. They don't have time to be, doing all this thoughts and feels, stuff. They just want to get right to the gist of it. People who are busy, if you have any kind of a product or a brand that relates to busy people, awareness is a really important pillar for you to remember. Another good pillar to talk about is aspiration, and this is one that we really focus on at Visit Savannah, being a travel in the travel industry and a travel organization. Aspiration focuses on people saying, I want to do that. I want that life. I want to see that. I want to go there. It's a very decision affecting pillar of content. And it makes your audience want to try something. It makes them want to do something. So every pillar is important in terms of KPIs, but for us in our industry of travel, aspiration is really important. It's important to remember too that aspiration doesn't mean envious, and we have to tread very lightly with that. Especially, being Savannah, we were just talking about this before we started recording. Kate and I were talking about how, the weather here, even though it's cold right now, is not that bad compared to other places. We have to tread lightly sometimes at Visit Savannah about, not rubbing that in people's faces, but also capitalizing on the fact that we do have really awesome weather here compared to, snowy, rainy, gray Ohio or Pennsylvania or wherever. So when creating aspirational content, keep in mind that we want to be inspirational, but not creating envy. Bad envy. A little bit of envy, not too much though. The next pillar of compelling content focuses on emotion. So this is where we're really making the audience feel something. We're really tugging at their heartstrings. If you've seen those ads that just almost bring like a tear to your eye, or they give you that little chill on your arm, that's where people are focusing on the emotion. And they hopefully are positive, kind of inspirational emotions like that, but they can also sometimes be negative emotions. You can watch ads that make you really mad, that make you feel something very raw. That can be a beneficial emotion to play on, but I would advise brands for the most part to be cautious of that, because your audience doesn't want to feel isolated, and generally people want to feel positive, not negative, especially in 2020. So whatever emotion you're going for, just be really aware of the repercussions of that. And last but not least, when creating compelling content, your audience is going to think about their identity, and the identity pillar allows your audience to personally relate to either the experience that's being offered in the campaign or the ad or the piece or whatever it is. The audience may see themselves in the actors or models or ambassadors that are featured in the content. It's a very niche perspective in terms of when you're focusing on the identity portion of compelling content. So this particular pillar might not always hit quite as many people in kind of a blanket way as the other 3, but it can be really effective because people feel so personally like the ad or the campaign is really personally relatable. So it's still a really important one to focus on, if not always, at least sometimes. So that brings me to my next point. Not always going to have all 4 pillars represented in every piece of content. You may only have one, you may have a mix of a few, you may have one that scales are a little bit tipped, but maybe a little bit of another pillar, and that's okay. It's important to keep a varied strategy so that you're reaching more people, so that you're really not boring your audience, right? We don't want to pigeonhole ourselves as a brand. We always want to be reaching new audiences, and so focusing on a varied strategy is really important for that. And the last thing I also want to mention in terms of the pillars of compelling content is that it's just like I said, using all 4 pillars or keeping a varied structure will reach more people. It's also important to remember that not everyone will respond the same, but you're going to have a better chance if you try and keep it varied and bounce around from different pillars, try something new. A big takeaway from content creation, whether it's for social media or otherwise, is to not be afraid to try new things and reach new audiences. Okay, so now we know what compelling content is, what it means, what the pillars are, but why is it so important? This may seem really obvious, but again, I'm all about trying to be as clear as possible. So as I mentioned before, your KPIs, your key performance indicators, whatever those are, they might be getting your consumer to click a link to your website. It might be getting somebody to buy your product, to visit your store, to book. For us at Visit Savannah, our budget is based on hotel motel tax. So our big thing is getting people to book room nights. And that is the end all to be all. We have other metrics that we use as well, getting follows on social media and click-through rates and all those things, but that really is the big one for us. Whatever your KPIs are, whatever combination they are, compelling content is important because it points directly to your KPIs and it should result in increases in your KPIs. As I mentioned before, compelling content also establishes you as a reputable competitor in your industry. We all want to be leaders. We don't want to be the ones just copying all the time or trailing behind. Although sometimes copying can be a really nice form of flattery, it can still be a really successful strategy. So always pay attention to what your competitors are doing and what's successful for them. But when you're kind of at the front of the line a little bit, it always kind of makes you a little more respected and a little more competitive in the industry. So that's always important. And compelling content, it's important because it reaches our audiences in ways that are authentic and evocative and original. It's not just the same old force-fed ads. It keeps things varied and it keeps people interested, and it really allows content creation to be more of an artistic experience and a real genuine experience for the audience rather than just the same old boring stuff. Okay, so now that we know what compelling content is, why it's important, what can we do now to create it? And a lot of these steps are going to be things that are going to be actionable that you can take right away. You can start them today with your team, or if you're an individual wearing many hats, managing social media and content strategy, you can do all of these things today. So the first thing is to remember to think like your audience. And this is really important. You may or may not be in the demo for your audience. Luckily for me, I'm generally in the demo of our audience, but I'm not always in the demo for audience, depending on our platform. But you have to remember what the audience wants, what matters to them, what speaks to them. That takes a lot of analysis and a lot of profiling a little bit. What's their age? Where do they live? What are their interests? Why do they like our product? Why don't they like our product? So you have to really think like your audience. If you have trouble doing that, talk to them. So that takes us right to next step 2 is to ask your audience directly what they want. The nice thing about the digital age with social media, email, newsletters, all of these different tools that we have to reach out to people, you can ask them directly, hey, what do you want to know more about our business, or what would really interest you in our program, or what keeps you from buying our product? You can ask people directly. They'll probably be honest with you. And then, as we mentioned before, thinking about competitors is really important, especially in terms of content. It's kind of what sets you above the rest. Think like your competitor and establish whether or not you want any given piece of content, and it can change for content as you create it, whether you want that content to align with your competitor or be different from your competitor. For example, in Savannah, we're always compared to Charleston, always. It gets really old. And yes, they do pay me to say that Charleston is no good, but sometimes Charleston does stuff that's really great. Explore Charleston is, a big competitor for us. And sometimes they do stuff that's really great that we sit back and we say, all right, maybe we need to take a leaf from their hat, or, see what they're doing that we can also incorporate. And sometimes they do things that say, you know what, I think we could do that, and I think we could take that in a totally different direction that would be way more successful for our brand and our destination. And again, that just depends on any given piece of content. That's not a strategy for overall competitive outlook. I think you have to silo it with every single piece of content and decide where it stands in terms of your competitors. And last but not least, give the people what they want. You've been thinking about them. You've been talking to them. You've been looking at the competitors. Just give them what they want. If they truly want it, then they should respond positively, and everybody should be happy then. It kind of goes back to that old saying of like, the customer is always right. There are pieces of content that I've created that have not been my favorite pieces of content, but they've performed really well because it's what the audience identifies with, and it's what they have expressed they want. And if it makes them happy and it results in our KPIs, then that's our job as content creators to do. Okay. Let's look at an example. So Kate mentioned this video actually earlier. We're going to watch it and talk about why it was such a successful piece of compelling content.
Hey y'all, I'm Shannon, and tonight we're searching for Savannah's most notorious spirits. They say Savannah's a city built on its dead. I guess we'll find out. Come on! Throughout the city's history, hundreds of supernatural sightings have been reported in the buildings and squares, just like here in Johnson Square. You'll notice that there's no Spanish moss. Ever wonder why? Stay at the Marshall House, which used to be a Civil War hospital, where a young soldier is said to still be wandering the halls looking for his lost limbs. They say the 1790 Inn and Restaurant, especially room 204, is haunted by a young woman mourning the loss of her sailor lover who never returned from sea. I haven't seen her though. Moon River Brewing Company is known as one of the most haunted places in America. I'll take mine to go. This building sat in disrepair for years before an upscale restaurant moved in. Now, staff report glasses flying off the shelves. Beneath the city streets lies a series of tunnels not normally accessible to the public, but tonight only, we've been granted exclusive access.
Got that door just shut.
Okay, let's just reset and go from the top. What was that?
That was not me. Hello?
Anybody there? Okay, I vote we get out of here.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Ooh, something touched me. The door's locked. Okay, go the other way. Go the other way. Go.
It follows along with a series that we created way back in March, where we thought of ways that we can show our audience what they want to see, but in unique ways. It all started with azaleas, which are one of those pieces of content that, yeah, it's great. I love azaleas too, but we get really tired of just doing the same old photos and stuff. So we came up with this idea to do this really fun flower hunter video, and it just took off. It was really great. It was so successful. We decided to turn it into a series, and every quarter we were going to aim to show a new kind of typically mundane subject about Savannah and show it in a really unique way. And of course, in October, we thought, God, we have to show ghosts. People want to come to Savannah for ghosts. But reality is we're not going to probably catch a ghost on camera. So how can we show that? And we brainstormed. We looked at, fun ways that we could kind of turn it into a spoof. And in that way, too, it reaches different audiences. It identifies with both your grandma and your 13-year-old kid and everyone in between. It doesn't discriminate for, genders or age or anything like that. It really is a video for everyone. So that's a good example of when something works to keep doing it. Think about your audience, think about your competitors. We knew that Charleston hadn't released anything like this. We knew that we were setting ourselves apart. We knew that it was a subject that our audience wanted to see. So it kind of hit all of those boxes. Because of the year that 2020 has been, we knew that people were looking for a little bit of comedic relief. So that also was a good strength to have in this series. And it gave us a chance to expand our creative wings. You know, like I said, we get kind of bored doing the same stuff over and over again too. So it really made everyone happy. It was a really successful campaign, and we shared it across social media, and it was really successful. So again, you can find that video on our YouTube channel or on our website. Okay, so now we're going to shift from compelling content to specifically talking about humanizing your brand voice. Humanizing your brand voice is kind of one of those buzzwords that we're hearing really often now, especially in the digital marketing space. But what does it mean? You know, is it just putting a face and talking head in front of your brand? Is it literally putting a voice on pieces of content? You know, what does it look like? So in the overarching sense, bringing a human quality to your content is what humanizing your brand is, right? It's bringing real emotions, real feelings, real people, real stories, incorporating that into your content strategy as a brand. It shows that people and not robots are creating your content and are the people managing your content strategy, your social media accounts, things like that. In the literal sense, it can mean showing faces or showing people in your photos. It can mean including narration or voiceovers on videos or Facebook Live videos. And it can also mean using strategies like influencer marketing or other non-actor ambassadors. And that includes your local community, that includes your employees, your users, whatever that may be. There's a lot of different ways to go down the rabbit hole of humanizing your brand in all of those different verticals. But in the more metaphorical sense, humanizing your brand means being honest and being heartfelt, whether that's in the copy that you're using in an Instagram caption or in the editorial of the piece that you write. It's about being really true about your product, about your brand, and about your story. It also means that you take pride in your audience and your team and in yourself as a content manager. Humanizing your brand shows people again that it's not just a robot pumping out social media posts that are never looked at again. You know, people know that your audience will know that there are people behind the accounts that are reading the comments, that are answering the questions, that are really thinking about the content that's being produced. And doing it in a very intelligent and emotionally responsible way. Humanizing the brand also kind of in the metaphoric sense means that you read the room, right? I'm constantly comparing this to like robots, and like if we just had computers pumping out our content and creating our content and scheduling our content and responding to things on social media, they don't have that sense for sentiment, but people do. And people are able to read the room, you know, especially as I mentioned in 2020, the whirlwind that this year has been. If you had a robot managing your accounts, you would have never been able to adjust your content strategy to whatever was happening in the world in 2020. But because we have people managing things, we need to take advantage of that and adjust our copy, our tone, our voice, whatever it may be, to adjust to what's going on in the world. And the last thing that's really important when talking about humanizing your brand and your brand voice is that this means that brands are accepting of imperfection. Because we are human, because we are humans creating the content, we're not always going to be perfect. And that means that sometimes every once in a while you're going to have a typo, you're going to have a grammar error, you might say the wrong information, you might answer a question wrong. You know, it's not all going to be perfect, but a human brand and a brand that is really actively pursuing being human will be okay with that, and we'll know how to move on from it. So let's talk about brand voice specifically on social media. This is kind of my silo a little bit of day-to-day work. So this is really important to me. Brand voice on social media was something that I had to make my own when I came onto the team, and we already had a really strong brand voice, but I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to spin it to be my own, but it wasn't easy and it didn't happen overnight. But here are some ways that you can take some ownership of your brand and your brand voice, starting right away. So make sure that you're being conversational. It's important to not be too formal. Keep things light, keep things casual. Also, make sure that when you're answering questions, when people are asking for tips or suggestions on things, be really honest with them. This is a big one for us at Visit Savannah. People ask us all the time, where's the best place to, eat this or do that, or, see the sunrise or see the sunset. And we give them honest tips. I really think about, wow, what experiences have I had? And, without trying to be too biased, we always provide several suggestions to give options and everything, but I'm not going to tell somebody that wants to see the sunrise to go to like the Back River Beach on Tybee, right? So you have to really be honest with people and give them real-time advice and things like that. Another really good way to keep things casual and clear is to include emojis, include appropriate punctuation, however that's appropriate for your brand. It may not always be appropriate for you to use emojis on your brand, but if you have a more playful one, it can be a really good way to connect with your audience and show that there's a person behind here and not just a bot like pumping out a comment or a question, that's an autofill question. So be mindful of that, and along in the same lines, make sure you're having genuine reactions. So I really try and read through every comment that comes through on Visit Savannah social media pages. And when people say something that is really heartfelt and really beautiful, I try and take the time to not just like the comment, but I respond back and say, hey, Carol, that's a really wonderful story. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Or, just be a little bit more personal with people. Again, moving farther down the line in terms of being personal, you can also think about including a signature. That's totally up to you. I think this is a big optional strategy, but if you're comfortable with it, including your first name when you sign off on comments or DMs, even just your initials, you can use a pseudonym too. But it just kind of adds that little extra personal touch that lets your customer know that you care. It's going to increase brand trust and really show more authenticity, that someone's really reading this. And again, it's not just a robot. And the last thing to mention, and I think this is something in 2020 that's really important to talk about, when you're talking about brand voice on social media, it's not just about the comments we're writing or the captions that we're including on social media posts as the brand. It's also about community management of the brand. When we have, for instance, when we have a lot of negativity on Visit Savannah's channel, we try and be a really positive brand, but we also try not to take any crap. So when we have a really awful, not just negativity, because that you have to let negativity happen a little bit, because that's just part of the world we live in. But when we have really awful hate speech, profanity, things that are just really clearly going too far, we always kindly, with as much friendly tone, emoji, kindness, but firm, remind people that they are here to share in their love for Savannah, and we welcome all suggestions and opinions, but please refrain from, using hate speech or whatever it may be. Maintaining those page standards and having those comments come out every once in a while when it's appropriate lets, again, our audience know that real people are looking at our pages. We're not just posting stuff and then forgetting about it. We're coming back to it. We're monitoring the sentiment on the pages. We're making sure that people feel safe when they come to our pages. And that all just increases that human quality and that connection that people are going to feel to your brand. So looking at a good brand voice, and of course I'm going to use examples from Visit Savannah here. A good brand voice reflects the brand. It relates to the audience. I mentioned earlier, you might not always be in your audience demo depending on the platform. And I think on social media, it's really important to mention that your audience is different on every platform in social media, or it may be different. For us at Visit Savannah, our audiences on Instagram are pretty different from our audiences on Facebook. And so we have to adjust our verbiage sometimes on captions to speak to those audiences a little more clearly, or sometimes just change the content altogether that we're presenting to them. Something that resonates with our Instagram audience might not really perform on Facebook, and vice versa. So your brand voice relates to whatever audience it is on whatever platform you're posting on, but it's also consistent and flexible. It develops, it evolves. It's a living, breathing thing that is able to adjust and be nuanced, but still overall maintain the same brand standard. And the really great thing about a good brand voice is that it should give your content creators some space to breathe. You know, you should never feel totally like the words you're saying are foreign as somebody that's writing captions or writing copy. You know, you should feel like you have at least a little bit of creative freedom to bring your own personality to it, even if it's just in the most minor way. A good brand voice really reflects the person behind the account, at least in a very minor way. And so these are just some posts that we had that were really successful that, you know, I thought reflected the photos, they reflected the destination, they reflected me, reflected the brand, spoke to the audience. And yeah, and you can see that people really responded and they performed really well.
Hey, Shannon, I don't know if you're trying to change the slide or not, but it's not changing.
Which slide are you stuck on?
The example, the ghost hunter.
Oh no, oh my gosh, how? Let's see. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, everyone. Okay. You didn't miss too much. I just talked over this slide for a while, and then I talked over this slide for a while. And let's see. This was the brand voice examples that I was just talking about. So we only missed maybe like 1 or 2 slides. If you're writing things down, let me go back to this one. This was where I was giving the tips on using brand voice on social media. If you want to take a screenshot of that really quick. And then I was just going over these brand voice examples. These are not anything too crazy. We'll go ahead and bump forward. Sorry about that, everyone. Okay, so let's talk about a bad brand voice. We've talked about a good one. Bad brand voices or aspects of weaker brand voices are voices that don't have any personality. They sound like robots. They act like robots. They don't personally relate to the audience in any way. Even if you sell air conditioners, there are ways to make that more fun and more relatable to your audience and create content that's going to engage people rather than just talking about, you know, yeah, this is an air conditioner and it keeps you cool in the summer. It does not have to be drab just because you don't have some, you know, beautiful destination at Visit Savannah. We're lucky because we're promoting such a beautiful place, and it's really easy to get lost in this whimsy and have this really fun voice. But I know that's really hard for a lot of other brands and a lot of industries. But be creative and stick your own voice in there as the content creator. A bad brand voice, as I mentioned before, doesn't change on the platforms. You have to be mindful of the audiences and what your audience demographics are. You can look at those using insights on the individual platforms. And look at, you know, what's the age, where are they from, where do they live, male or female. You can look at all different kind of indicators like that to kind of adjust whatever your strategy is. And as I mentioned, a bad brand voice never changes. And I'm talking long-term change. Your brand voice needs to evolve with time. It can't just stay the same. Our brand voice at Visit Savannah is not the same now as it was in 2010, and that's a good thing. We live in a much different world. So make sure that, again, your brand voice is flexible and ready to evolve. Okay, so some of the challenges of humanizing a brand, and we're going to speak specifically to multi-person teams versus single-person teams. Multi-person teams, which is kind of what we have at Visit Savannah. We have several different content creators that do things in the digital space. It can be hard because we all have different personalities and different personal voices. So how do we encompass that into one brand voice? Well, a really important thing that we do is we create a voice and style guide. And if you have somebody on your team that wants to undertake that, power to them. A voice and style guide is really helpful in just making it clear what the guidelines are and the standards are for the verbiage and the copy and everything that your brand is using, the goals of your brand voice and all those things. It's also important that you read and review each other's work regularly. We have a really open door policy on our content team that we're constantly running things by each other. Hey, how does this sound? What do you know, does this look okay? I don't know. I like this photo. I don't know what to say. It's a very creative space, and it's a really wonderful thing about working on our team. And it helps us be more consistent with each other because we're kind of all turning the wheels at the same time in the same direction a little bit. And the other thing is to make sure that maybe you use examples of other brands. You know, you can send a couple of examples to your team and say, hey, I really like what these brands are doing. Let's try and move more towards this direction. It kind of gets everyone moving in one direction with a goal in mind that they can actually reference and look at. With single person teams, you kind of have a little bit of the opposite. You don't have as much creative freedom. You might not have as many people to offer their insights and their input. The big thing with a single person team is probably executive buy-in, especially, you know, now we know that social strategy and digital strategy is really important, but sometimes the top level execs in our companies and our leaders don't always know that. So it's important to start small, have your strategy laid out in really clear language that they can understand, that's not overwhelming. Be prepared to present that to them. It will help build trust, and they will, I think, feel more comfortable getting their toes wet rather than diving right in. And then as you start to have some really successful pieces of content and social posts and things like that, make sure you're reporting that back to them, you know, so that they know that what you're doing is good and you're doing good work and it's really successful and that there's a lot of value in what you're doing. Okay, so I have another video that probably you're not going to be able to hear, but I'm going to talk over it. You'll get kind of an idea as it plays because it does have captions. So this is an example of a video that we created at Visit Savannah. We've been talking a lot about how we as the brand can have a good brand voice, but how do we get other people to reflect the brand voice? It can be really hard. It can be hard to relinquish that control a little bit too as the brand manager, but you kind of have to look for opportunities as they arise. So in this video, we started out with a simple social media post way back in the pandemic, just kind of looking for new things to say and keep the audience engaged. I asked the audience to tell us where they'll be coming from when they're able to travel again. We got tons of comments, and a lot of them were really far away international destinations, which kind of surprised us and got us thinking, okay, well, these people that are, you know, literally can't leave their country, can't come in our country, how do we still feel connected to them? How do we let them know that, you know, we still are thinking about them? How do we safely create this content in a pandemic and do something that nobody else has done before? So we had the idea to reach out to the people that had international answers, and we just asked them to send in a video and let us know why they love Savannah. And we got really cool responses, and Tyler cut it all together in this video that we then distributed on social media. So I'll play it, and it's not going to have noise. But all of these videos were created by the users. We didn't have to spend any money. We didn't have to go there. They didn't have to come to us. It was safe. It was raw too, which was really good because it is real. These are real people. These are not actors. We didn't pay them. And they were just happy to talk about Savannah, and they were happy to be a part of the project. It was fun for them to see themselves in the video. So it hit a lot of those really important key points to human content. So this couple in England was really great. We loved seeing that he had on a trailer park shirt, which he didn't tell us ahead of time, and it's just fun to see how much everybody loved it. The other really important thing that this video does is it allows other people to be the ambassadors for the brand. So we as Visit Savannah can tell people all the time how great Savannah is, how wonderful it is, it's beautiful. But when they hear it from someone else, then people really trust it. You know, it's not just us force feeding them. So Veronica is our last one, so I'll go ahead and pause it on her. But it gives you an idea of another really great cost-effective piece of content that you can create safely in the world that we're living in. You can stay connected to your audience and provide new forms of content that people maybe haven't seen before. And it creates that really genuine human connection that people are looking for on social media and from brands and their content strategies. So without further ado, I think that is all we have. Can you see my screen? You can see my screen, right? Okay. Yeah, I think that's all we have that's all I have prepared for today. I want to thank everybody for watching. I'm sorry that my videos and it got messed up with the screen share and stuff, but as I said, I have my slide deck. I'm happy to share it with anyone. And if you have Q&As, I'm happy to hear those too.
It looks like Emily already has a question she put in the comments. Can you talk about brand voice in professional services companies?
I cannot find that Q&A in my sidebar, but yes. So brand voice in professional service companies, again, you have to think about the connection of the voice of the brand, the service you're providing, but also the people you're providing it to. So it has to, yes, reflect the product, but also what is the language that is going to directly relate back to your audience? And is that something that's more casual? Are they looking for something more professional? A really good brand voice is able to toggle between being professional and being really clear and really precise and everything like that, and being more casual and conversational. You have to have the ability to go back and forth and know when to do that. And that can be really hard. And I think that's just something that comes with experience and actively thinking about that as you're answering questions, as you're writing emails and newsletters and editorial for the website, whatever it may be. You have to consciously keep that in mind as you're creating the content and how things are being said. And if you're not sure, getting a second opinion is always really good. Like I said, we review stuff all the time here on our team. Write something out and then send it to some of your colleagues or your supervisor or even somebody outside of your office and see what they think and see how it hits home or misses the mark.
We have another question. Frank Mendelson asked, so successful, what are you using to measure success? And he put in parentheses the azalea example.
Great question, Frank. So we typically in the past have looked at, for me personally in my role, have looked at social media metrics like engagement, follower count, click-through rates, things like that. Our website is really big for our organization because statistics show the longer amount of time people spend on our website, the more likely they are to book those room nights, which are our main KPI as an organization. However, for me in my role, going back to that, I've usually looked at engagement, and certainly we do look at organic viewership on things like the Azalea video. We know we specifically focused on Facebook because that was kind of the audience that was really tailored to, although it was successful on our other channels as well, but that was kind of our main focus. We looked at our viewership, we looked at our engagement. The big thing for us on that video though was sentiment, and that overall now moving forward, moving into 2021 as an organization, sentiment is our main focus. How we're creating content that is speaking to the audiences we want to reach, and the kind of responses that we're getting back. We're really taking a more emotional view on it than I think we ever have before, focusing on the quality of the content versus the quantity of likes and things like that. So that's just how we're individually doing it. I mean, I would advise any marketing team to talk and see where their measurement should come from, but that's just an example of how we're doing it at Visit Savannah.
Everybody's saying thank you. I have a question. You talked a little bit about the difficulties of coming into onto a new organization, like when you started at Visit Savannah, and I know you told me personally you've been with Visit Savannah for several years, about 3. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I think whenever you're trying to, I've run a few social media accounts, and you always want to put a little bit of a personal, like you said, touch in those accounts. But finding the right bit can be challenging sometimes, and also finding like what works for your audience. So to me, social media is the best place to trial and error things. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on like overcoming those difficulties, or what kind of difficulties arose when you were searching for voice and compelling content that works.
Yeah, that's a great question. It is a lot of trial and error. It takes a lot of time. You literally, as a content manager, especially social media manager, you develop a relationship with your audience, and it doesn't develop overnight. Like any relationship, it takes time. It takes really getting to know each other. Really, you get kind of like a visceral feeling for how your audience is going to react to things. It's almost like I can almost predict them sometimes now, which is very eerie and weird, but I guess good. That's the way it should be. But sometimes I'm way off. I mean, I'm not perfect either. We all miss the mark. I would say that if you're new into your organization or new in your role, you need to start just by getting your feet on the ground and establishing the standard that's already been set. So I didn't have my own voice when I first started at Visit Savannah as a social content. The big thing for me was just being able to get the voice that had already been established. And once that had been established, and that probably took the better part of a year for me, once that was done, then I was able to start to add a little bit of my own flair here and there. And even then, sometimes it fell flat. Sometimes it was successful. It took a lot of trial and error. And again, that time as I'm getting to know my audience more and really reading them better, that was kind of how it developed for me. And then by the time we got to 2020, and I'm in my 3rd year of doing this, 2020 was like all bets were off the table. I should probably mention that the Flower Hunter video, we made that thinking like, this thing is so funny, and like we just thought it was great. And then we went into lockdown, what was that, March like 18th or something here in Savannah. And we were like, well, crap, like we just made this really awesome video. It's really funny, but like the world is literally falling apart. It was a huge risk, and we all knew it was a risk, including our CEO, Joe Marinelli. He was like, listen, guys, I don't know how this is going to go, but you have my blessing to do it. Let's just see what happens. And thankfully, it was hit right on the money. It was exactly what people needed. But you're not always going to know whether your voice is going to resonate the way you want it to, even after you spend years with your audience. But I think taking those bold little baby steps forward, again, like when I was talking about getting the executive buy-in, that kind of shows that, your supervisors need to trust you, your organization needs to trust you, and you need to trust yourself and trust your gut and your decisions and how you're going to be addressing your audience. A big one, and then I'll be done talking. A big one for us has been dealing with hate speech in 2020 and just a lot of the negativity that we receive at the chamber and at Visit Savannah. And sometimes, it's hard because it feels so personal. Like I'm the one that gets all this stuff, and I'm like, I don't even know, I mean, we had people that got laid off, like my boyfriend lost his job, I've personally been affected by this, and it hurts so much to have people just talk to you like you've been immune. And it really started to bother me. And I've had a few instances where I've responded to people in private DMs and just said, hey, this is a really tough time for everybody. Like, I get it. We get it. We're doing our best. Like, hang in there. Like, and it's actually been really successful. People have responded really positively. So sometimes it's just kind of taking down that that wall a little bit, that fourth wall, and really leveling with your audience. But it's all dependent on the individual situations and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I get that. It's hard when you're passionate about what you do too, I'm sure. And you feel like you're putting your own kind of spin on things, and then people have negative things to say. I've been there too. And that's always no fun. It's easy to jump to the defensive route, and you just gotta pull back and try to be understanding. And I get it. Yeah.